Hey everybody, welcome. Welcome to another IGDA LA's edition of the speaker series. And with me tonight, we have a special guest, a really good friend of mine. That's right, Tomo does rule. My good friend Tomo. Funny story, Tomo is actually one of the first devs and like friendly person that I've met in the game dev scene when I first moved to LA. And he's got some great insight and is always thoughtful in his response and everything. So I'm really glad to have him tonight. And he is going to be doing a talk on how he looks at making games. So I am going to let him introduce himself, and then we will bring everything over to the slideshow. All right, Tomo, I am going to swap this over to you. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, take it away, Tomo. It's all you.
Well, hello, everyone. Um, right now, you're seeing a black screen, and that is my presentation on its first slide. My name is Tomo Moriwaki, as was just described. Been making games for a fairly long time. I think we're going to make our way to the 30-year mark at some point in the next year and a half or so, maybe. I am a game designer for the most part, or have been mostly a game designer over the course of those three-ish decades. I've done a lot of stuff though, and seen I've seen a large percentage of the game industry evolve, and that's been sort of an interesting thing to watch. I mean, I get it; things are kind of weird now, and but I feel like it also makes sense too. Um, so should I just start in on the presentation then?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Let's let's do that. Okay, so first of all, thank you to IGDA LA. They have these mixers on the fourth Wednesday of the month, and I like going to them, and I like running into you. I'm making some assumptions that maybe some of you that are watching right now may have met before. Um, and also, as the presentation proceeds, please feel free to ask questions. I'm keeping an eye on Twitch chat, and I'm more than happy to, if not sort of wanting to promote your engagement and the questions you have. This presentation only exists to kind of make an interesting and or valuable experience for you as the watcher. And so you have agency over that by just getting involved and asking questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So let's start with this is me. I mean, I talked a little bit about this, but about who I am, but I got my start at Treyarch in 1997. I worked on a PC game called Die by the Sword at the very beginning, and then over the course of some number of years, sort of made my way through the ranks of Treyarch and sort of maybe critically found myself in a position of the creative director for the Spider-Man 2 game in 2004. And then after some of Spider-Man 3, had a kid and left Treyarch. And then eventually, after some consulting, found my way to EA and worked on Boom Blocks and a Medal of Honor title. And after some amount more of work after that, I ended up as I co-founded a company called Hyperkinetic Studios with Rich Bisso and Dave Padilla, whom I'm sure many of you know. And for the most part, I've done almost everything in games, at least a little bit, except for actually being a software engineer. All right, so before I continue on the presentation, I just want to do a little bit of a side note. I think that we're in this era where we talk about work-life balance a lot, and we sort of have the specter of the crunch culture that was very ever present in the sort of semi-moderate past or distant past for us. Um, and I feel like it's always sort of worthwhile to talk a little bit about my view of it after all this time. And so the quick synopsis of that is um, performance, which is almost always first and foremost in most of our minds, cannot be properly uh, described without sustainability. And like this diagram just made me laugh. Um, we grow and even though I think the diagram meant to talk about exercise, which obviously is also very important, I also like to see it as growing to have fun and joy, then that stopping, and then the cutting off of fun and joy being the pathway to death. Um, but more importantly, it's not just protecting your commitment levels and your energy levels and kind of addressing and paying attention to and taking charge of your recovery periods, right? That is also true for, I want to say, especially for us creative professionals, very important for your hedonism and your joy to be treated the same way as your sort of energy levels and your kind of your physical health or sleep schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, talk isn't about that, but I think it's always worth bringing up. And I also feel like just by bringing it up, someone might ask questions about it, and that's kind of cool. All right, so on to the presentation. The talk is about the role imagination plays in defining our objectives, at least kind of on the way in. But in total, the talk is really about we have to work towards testability. And that, in a nutshell, sort of describes my perspective on game development. So um, my claim is that we we underserve the definitions of our objectives when we work, almost always, especially when it comes to game design or the creation of the product, right? The thing that the player actually ends up playing, and the thing that whether they enjoy it or not is all that ultimately matters, and that like a way I describe it, or one facet of it would be, uh, if you try to remember some event from your life, you can do the easy remembering. And the easy remembering is to kind of read the text off the label of the memory and go like, oh, well, in my fifth birthday, I remember watching Godzilla shows on a TV in Culver City somewhere. That'd be like sort of reading like a bullet point in the document. But there's a much more serious version of remembering is to me to try to immerse myself in that memory and start feeling what it felt like and it'll start, you know, kind of details will start to emerge from that for at recalling things, right? That our imagination and our memory is sort of a critical muscle in all of this process. Yeah, accommodating testability is what I would say the most critical thing in development. And part of why I'm talking about this imagination part first is that let's just say the quick description of maybe the overall talk is imagination is the route to us imagine feeling what it's like to be the person who might engage with our work. And that's the thing we need to make testable, right? We need to get good at envisioning experiences so that we know what to build. And the only way that iterative process can be effective and like at its best or faster, you have to rig it up so that you can create tests against that imagination. And so, like I was saying, imagination is the starting point. Um, certain obvious things about it is like if I can't imagine it, then there's no starting point in some ways. I understand that many of us make games by throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's always there and available to you. You'll never not have that option at your disposal. But we also know that when we sort of randomly search, that we don't know what we're going to find, and we don't know if what we find is going to have any affinity for what we're going to build, and we don't know if it can lead to something else. You very, very dangerous place for so many of us developers to be, especially, I mean, more so when your budget starts to grow, is to think you can explore your way out of your problem. And rather than strategize your way out of the problem, rather than envision a path and converging on a target point. This maybe sounds obvious, But at the same time, if you look at yourself, you'll see maybe too many times where you work before you think. And imagination as an idea generally, it's like too big, right? It's not so helpful to say imagination is the starting point. And so I'm gonna have to get into a little bit more detail. Um, the cool part of the word is really sort of that there's this rich and at least potentially endless and full of things internal landscape that all of us have. Um, I think that, you know, the majority of our wonder and our awe is in there. And it takes sort of seeing things and translating it into these amazing moments for us to kind of have those great things that exist in our imagination or well, imagination, memory, sort of in some ways, whatever. And so some questions and some sort of like thought experiments about this as I kind of like establish this foundation here is um, I also feel like because it's opaque and inside our heads, let's say I'll create a surrogate for imagination. It's really how do you think, or how does the combination of your thoughts and feelings work? Um, no one can be inside your head, so theoretically, you can tell us things about what's going on inside your internal landscape and experience that no one else would be able to identify. They make guesses, but if you try to think about you making guesses about what's going on in other people's heads, I think you rapidly discover that it's extremely opaque. And I have some really an interesting example here, like late 2024, maybe October period of time. I found out or figured out or discovered that I have a thing called aphantasia, and what that means is like when I close my eyes, I can't see anything. I can't see like the shape of the number three or the way an apple looks. Um, and maybe a more clarifying way of describing it is when I have a memory transaction with my life experience, I can't bring into my current imagination any visual data. And that doesn't mean I can't see things. It doesn't mean I don't understand how things look, but that transaction just doesn't come with any visuals. That means that they're at least along that axis, I think very differently than I think something like 94% of people. Um, what's going on inside that point on the point being only that what goes on inside our heads is and it's unavailable to every other human being. And so it's maybe the kind of thing that you never even ask the questions about. Maybe it's the kind of thing you never even try to work on. It's the kind of thing that since it's right in front of your eyes or right inside your head all the time, it's not something that you strive to cultivate, or it's not something that you think you can take to the gym to work out and get stronger. So, sort of as we connect the idea of imagination, which, by the way, if I think about imagination, describe it as like cutting and pasting from my memory, and I don't mean like literally just the cutting and pasting, right? It's much more like sort of like semantic and like idea based, right? It's not like I cut and paste moments of my life into my current imaginations. That if I don't have things in my life experience, it might be difficult for me to think about them right now. It might be difficult for me to assign them to my future, right? I can't make it a part of my planning. And what that also means then is I can't make it a part of my designs. Um, so this imaginative experience, right, of kind of processing my life and what goes on inside my head, that then creates the raw materials that I then try to put together in my planning, imagination, thought process, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, that's the sort of the essential mechanism that we kind of invent ideas. So the punchline here, most important step I want to sort of discuss here. Nice, Qui-Gon Jimon. You with the aphantasia, I'm assuming. Um, so the reason we talk about imagination, we talk about how we could work it out, how it obviously has this important effect on our design, um, and all the but probably something I mentioned before. The most important part of this imaginative experience is me imagining what it's like for people to be playing my game, for people to be going through my experience, or that when I devise the target, the experiential target of what I'm building, that the more detailed and the more sort of true a envisioning of a user's experience I can concoct in my imagination, the more I have to work with. And maybe more importantly, as we start moving towards the end of this, the more I can test. If and sort of in a way that this is not, it's like sort of hard to bring this into our reality, but if I feel something very strongly, then now I can build software and play it and go, is this making me feel that? Right? Because I felt it softly, now I could compare those things. And that's sort of the essence, I think, of the kind of testability we're kind of striving to get to. And so, first step in that process, in my mind, is to separate your game's design from your game's experiential goals. And I'm not saying that I want to start right out the gate saying it's not entirely possible because we don't kind of work that way. Right. And so, what about a game's design then? And so let me just do a kind of a quick general definition here, right? Is how do you describe the experience? How do you describe the game? And you'll find that there are a large range of them. If you just think about it a little bit, you'll realize that probably hardly any two game design documents are in the same format and even describe the same types of things. I mean, many are sort of itemized descriptions of systems and sort of like the numerical specifications that are necessary for perhaps a software engineer to build them. Some of them have like walkthroughs of experience. Some of them have some amount of story that they're trying to tell. Some of them talk, there's a lot of, but a lot of it is sort of itemization of what's present in the game, as if it's sort of like a shopping list for someone who's going to build it. And of course, that's necessary. I mean, it's going to be hard to communicate how to make the game without saying the things that are going to be inside of it. But a list of what the game's contents are and how they work together, I think if you think about it, it does not describe the player's experience. And that player's experience is theoretically the only thing you're selling. Like a thought exercise I like to employ to kind of get this idea across is if I make a thing and when you play it, you don't notice the work I've done, does it matter that I did the work? And I think it's obvious that it doesn't, right? Let's say I made something and I felt that by all accounts it should have made you laugh, but it doesn't make you laugh, right? The the undeniable test is that the players didn't dig it, the players didn't feel it, the players didn't notice, and it's not an acceptable argument to say, but it was there, but it was supposed to work like this. Those arguments are for the iterative process. I am striving to accomplish this and we haven't gotten it yet. Look, it's not happening. So we need to continue to try to achieve those experiential objectives. And in that language, you kind of can separate a game's design from its experiential objectives. And part of the reason why I say it's hard to separate them is that in practice, the way we envision an experience or we create or we kind of describe a direction to go into, or we're describing users that we want to find enjoyment in the same way as these other games. We have a million ways to talk about it, but it's essential to focus on what that player's going through. And again, that kind of gets us back to this imaginative exercise of how much detail can I envision that experience? Can I talk you through the first 30 seconds of the experience? And when I do so, what did I leave out? And how much of the way you feel when you're going through those 30 seconds of experience am I talking about? Because the more I can talk about how you feel, the more your feelings can be part of the objective structure. And what's nice about feelings is we could have someone play and we can say, does this make you feel afraid? And if it doesn't, and that was our experiential goal, the design we used to get there needs to be improved towards that goal. And maybe hope like bit by bit, we'll keep talking like about how the testability is sort of the only way towards quality. Quick stepping back and caveat, sometimes you can win and you don't have to have a good process. Sometimes things will work fine because you copied something in the most of something that's really hot. Like let's say you're the second person to have a battle royale game and it was just okay and you still did fine. There are counterexamples to what I'm describing as what I think the best way to approach game development. But this is sort of like my best interpretation and understanding of how to make it consistent and reliable, and maybe more importantly, grow your own skill set to kind of be a force of predictability and repeatability. Here's my one line, by the way. After all these years, this is the only thing I can say without understanding your situation. That describes what makes a good game designer. The good game designer can estimate the impact of a change on the user's experience. I can't say more and I can't say less than that. And so there's obviously a lot of implications in this sentence. The implications are that you have to practice. In fact, I get better at estimating the impact of a change by making a change and seeing its impact. But if I don't have a testable criteria, I don't know how to really measure how well I've done, right? If I don't make a prediction about what the work is going to do to users, then when it does something to them, I can't describe the marginal difference. And maybe very importantly, then I can't next time around determine if I got closer, right? And if I do this enough times, if I did this loop thousands of times, almost certainly I would start to be able to see the patterns that lead to getting closer to the result I want. And right, and it's if I didn't think these thoughts while doing it, I may not get the benefit. I may not be iterating my work to get users to respond the way I want them to. And it says bad advice, but it just means that I think advice is often bad. So many of the things I might tell you, if I was to think about the way I would approach something, or what I think is an important thing to be thinking about, or what the priorities are for a given idea, or let's say a genre of games, or how to approach production, it's bad advice until I know your situation. Because what are the chances that our situations match? What are the chances that the things I'm thinking about when I'm answering your question? Because if you ask me something, my imagination starts kicking into gear. I start looking through my raw materials to try to construct an answer. And there's no way they're the same as yours. Now, we can get lucky and we can get more or less close, right? And obviously, we've had lots of conversations and we've learned a lot from each other. But generally speaking, it can't be great instructions for how to approach your problem. And so, I mean, the solution to that, by the way, is to get to know each other. Like, if you want proper advice from someone, you need to kind of pull them in to your context. They need to understand where you're at and the situation you're in to kind of give you their best guess of how their life experience and sort of lend clarity to your current set of problems. So, speaking of bad advice, the way this kind of looked before was sort of like it was suggesting a certain approach to production in game development. Um, but that's not the right language. The right language is this is the way I would analyze someone else's game development process. Right now, that's something now that is just telling you how I problem solve and trying to throw my thought process open onto the table. Um, and so let's maybe get to it. Um, I, a quick aside, I just found this diagram very funny because I feel like it's very, very telling and very real that this is the life we lead. And there's a reason why I don't stick finishing what you're trying to accomplish, because this just kind of seems to go on and on and on forever. All right, so we're going to analyze a process, and by the way, let me know if I start overdoing it on time, and I think maybe I need to pick up the pace a little bit here. So We talked a little bit about experiential goals. I'm sort of trying to define them as like the story of the lived experience of the player. That's the thing we're trying to describe, right? When someone plays, what do they go through? What are the range of results at everything that they encounter and every choice that they make? And what is their thought process when they see things? The lived story of a player playing your game for the first time or any experience that you build. It could be like dates or parties or whatever. Um, that's full of questions and confusions and uncertainty, right? It doesn't read like a cool story that you've read. It actually reads like, "What's that? I think that's this. Oh no, it's not. Why isn't this working? What's going on here? I'm a little confused about where I'm supposed to go. Wait, am I going the right way? Right? It's like this like nonstop chatter of confusion and resolutions and confusion and resolutions, but partly because of the way we kind of solve things, it's actually confusion, 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 resolve, confusion, 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 resolve, which means it's overwhelmingly like uncertainty chatter. And it's probably not a lot of, it would probably be a lot of no fun to listen to if you could be inside someone's head right as they play the game for the first time. That said, their experience of it also comes with potentially a huge amount of enjoyment and a huge amount of like memorable changes to them that theoretically are your fault. So step two, the designs against goals and why, and like saying, like I was saying before, how they're hard to separate. And maybe I should get in a little bit more detail, right? In all reality, when we're designing something, we cut and paste together different mechanics from different games and genres and themes, and we're sort of testing them out in our imagination, trying to find something that feels good. And then we sort of document it to understand it better. And then in that kind of like dwelling on me documenting this little fragment of my imagination, now I'm starting to feel the experience a little more. And I'm really cutting, and like I think the analogy of cutting and pasting from my experience starts to really make a little more sense at this point, maybe in the presentation. So, so in some ways, you design things, and then you feel the experience, and then you design them more, and then you feel them more, and you design them more, and you feel them more. That process is obviously very intermeshed and mushed together. So really, the recommendation is actually just to consider them separately and try to keep them apart, because the more you keep them apart, the more you can do the critical thing, at least in this case too, is that you recognize that your design is a proposed solution to accomplish or make real the experiential goals that you've either felt, described, touched upon, whatever, alluded to. And so from that design, let's say we've built a design, we've gone through back, we've done a great job of going back and forth between this kind of what that lived experience, that lived story, the story of the lived experience, and this specification for a game experience that could be turned into a development plan. And it's worth noting, right, that the imaginative exercise of envisioning that user's experience, that player's experience, is to some extent a different skill than designing for it. And granted, in the actual process I described, obviously they're highly intermeshed, and your gameplay experience and the things you've worked on in the past and the whole of your life experience sort of has this big effect on that. But the documenting it strictly, there is a lot more just conventional game design skills that we kind of maybe see as more conventional. Translating the game design into the development plan, however, another set of skills. And development execution, a totally another set of skills. And if we were just to give a one sentence generalization of development plan, it is break design into pieces so that it can be made into tasks. There's a whole other conversation or presentation to have just about that block, just like there's a whole presentation about design against goals. And maybe you can loosely see that this is maybe sort of experiential goals focused presentation. Again, development execution, 100%. There is tons of material out there. There are tons of experts out there. There's a whole world to development execution. But business end of why we do whatever we do, at least insofar as what I believe, is testability against the design and the goals. And that means that part of the experiential goals and the designs, they need to be designed and envisioned in a way so that when you actually have software that you can test, that you're validating or describing the difference between what you got and what you were trying to make. And so, okay, just a kind of a quick thing, like, let's say the delta between execution and design is too great. Well, it means our development plan might need some work, right? That the plan that was built wasn't actually a great translation of the design. And so this execution is sort of heading away from what the design is describing. And then we do the next step. Let's say that the execution and the design are matched. So what we got is close to the design, but the outcome fell short of the experiential goal. Well, that describes that the design itself wasn't a great translation of the experiential goals, and now you iterate on the design. And sort of lastly, you got what you were looking for, and you're kind of mostly feeling it. But now that you have a close look at it, you're realizing that you want to go somewhere different, or you want to make changes to the experiential goals, which is hopefully what's happening in a lot of cases. Or, I mean, okay, hopefully what happens is you build it and it's so good that all you need to do is polish it and get it out. That's obviously superior. But if all of the skills and roles on the team are being handled well, well, then really what we want to do is iterate to gain insight to this experience we're building and continue to move that experience towards a better place, because that experience itself is ultimately what the product is, right? That we check all the boxes off that are described in the design almost doesn't mean anything. What funny joke though, or maybe kind of a funny insight about all this, is that this is a whole lot like something we see a lot. Is it really just scientific method, but for creative goals? And yeah, I think kind of it is, especially around this testability or experiments to create evidence and proof for theories. Except in our case, the theories are that I can get the player to feel a lot of suspense and then feel a ton of relief for this character if we set this up this way and have these experiences work out this way, use our game systems to create a certain amount of tension and a certain amount of progression, and then drop that climax on them, and then resolve and celebrate their success. So just a quick note here that this isn't the process for the whole project, that this process analysis tool should really be seen as completely scale agnostic. I can use it to describe our task to task approach. I could use it to describe whether our design iterate, like as we work on the design, could we go through this lab? Can we have a testable result of can I make my design testable in any way to validate the experiential goals? And yes, of course I could, because I could talk to you about it and you could tell me if you think I'm getting closer. And then a day later I could come back to you and say, if I change this, this, and this, do you think we're getting closer to that experiential goal? And obviously you can just create documents for plans and create schedules and talk about you think they're better. But there's no testing that's more powerful or important to this process than I experience gameplay, or I experience the game experience. God, using the word experience endlessly, and we're comparing it to what we're trying to we're comparing it to what we're trying to build as a team. Right, raising Sea-Doo. How do you define good experiential goals that are testable, especially across different scales? So, that which is testable is as simple as I can ask the question and I can get information from that question that helps me determine how close I am to that goal. And so let's say I wanted someone to understand uh, a joke about pencils in Pennsylvania. We build the software that tells the joke, person plays it, and then we ask them. We built some questions in mind, or we are just observing the player, whatever it means to just to say we have confidence the experience we were trying to build has actually happened. And part of it is just you playing it, because once you play the actual software, it also changes things. But a lot of it just boils down to, we wanted you to feel a lot of anticipation here, and we wanted you to be really curious about these power ups in our game systems here. And this is about the time we like around here. How did you feel about being exposed to maybe a new power up that kind of opened up ways to have this kind of new gameplay? Because we saw that you used it, and how'd that go? I mean, a lot of it can just be sort of focus testing or gameplay testing in nature. But if you don't know what, like the bottom line is, if you don't know specifically what you want, then for sure you can't test it, because now you're just making it, and people on the team just say, I like it or I don't. And then now you're going to be moving forward into space based on something as coarse and crude as so and so liked it more, so and so didn't like it, and so was a little on the fence. But in the last 3 weeks, that's the best that we got. So now that's the direction we're going, right? There's a difference between that and we have a ton of language wrapped around what a person goes through. Because maybe there's I should take a step back. Like what I think our jobs are as designers is to take control of the experience, to make the player have feelings and thoughts and make decisions and then live with the consequences of those decisions, and that moves them to change the way they behave and then do things in a particular way. Oftentimes the path that they can travel is wide, and there's potentially a large number of options. But I think like a very junior thought in my mind is when people think they're giving choices and freedom to players without defining what that freedom means. You can't something I tell all my students is you can't have a second choice until you have one good one, right? And we're crafting for quality. I hope that makes sense. And let me see where we are for. So yeah, and the sort of the simplest way to describe this whole presentation is we develop good objectives and build towards testing them. And kind of a complaint I have maybe about the information that gets moved around a lot in our industry is we talk about the middle part endlessly, even though any specific talk about the middle part is almost certain to not apply to you, right? And maybe parts of it will. And obviously, us continuing to talk and share our stories about how we do things and share our insights with each other over time moves all of us forward. But I think in this last couple of years, and especially over the course of teaching my level design class at Art Center, I'm really coming to realize that we miss the mark a lot and talk about the same problems and give the same answers to those problems, and they become sort of like common knowledge, but they're not useful, right? The kind of conventional wisdom of game development is sort of a fallacy. You know, yeah, if any of you can think of any conventional wisdoms and then throwing them into chat, and then we can test it. Come up with a conventional wisdom that our industry likes to bandy around. That is useful. Other than it's going to be harder than you think. Oh, and with a lot of my presentations, I like this slide here at the end. There's this French philosopher Albert Camus, and he wrote a long essay about a character named Sisyphus, who's a Greek god character. I don't think he's actually a god though, and he rolls the rock up a hill only for it to roll back to the bottom, and that he's kind of cursed to do that forever. And obviously, you know, he's saying something here that, oh, he has to be happy. But I think it's funny that he even thinks that, because those of us who play games and make games, of course, all we do is roll the rock up the hill for it to roll back down, and we pay for it. So for us, it's like it's not an insight that Sisyphus is happy. It's just our everyday. And uh, and that's me. And so that concludes the presentation part. And so I think we want to move to, well, our time might be a little bit limited at this point. I don't know if we have a strict cutoff for 7.
No, no, we do not. And thank you, Tomo, for that amazing insight. Right, as a systems designer myself, I feel like a lot of the times that when I'm designing something, I am trying to really predict what the player is going to do, right? And how they'll respond to the things that they come across, whether it's something that will engage the player emotionally, or it's a new the introduction of a new gameplay beat that, is it too much, is it too little? And I think it is one of those things where there's no there is no right answer, right? Like no one has the right answer. And it's usually like some people may have better answers, but there is no like right answer, because it's sometimes you do a playtest or something and what you expect is completely the opposite of what you get. Which, then you have to like readapt and kind of figure out like, okay, what is the player doing? Why are they doing that? And sort of get into that whole like mindset of understanding why the player is doing the things that they're doing.
For sure. No, I hear what you're saying. Although, an interesting permutation on your language is we're not trying to predict what the player's going to do. We're engineering what the player's going to do, right? That it's there is like we're obviously using our kind of predictive capabilities and using our knowledge of how things work to kind of make to know what the player's going to do next. But ideally, what we start doing is we master getting them there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not predicting. I'm pushing.
Right, right,
I'm luring them into traps. You know, I'm telling jokes and I believe they're gonna laugh because of the setup.
right.
And actually it brings up an interesting point. I think uh, a way I always like to describe sort of like the trajectory of less experience to more experience in game design is that at the less experienced state, we sort of fixate on these great results and these great moments that we remember. And we can look back to our life experience and find these things that we like so much and we try to recreate them. But then when we do that, we start running into this problem where they don't deliver the goodness that I remember them delivering. And then we start taking a closer look at these things that like sort of bring us joy, or these memorable great experiences, and we start to recognize that it has less to do with the result, less to do with the event that we remember as good, and more as we get more experienced to the setup that got me there. And then we start getting more and more sensitive to how do I prep someone to have a great experience. And maybe one of the ways I describe that is that you sort of litter their player path with the raw materials that once combined, or when combined in an interesting way, kind of make a big kapow of revelation, or an epiphany of understanding, or oh, that makes sense. I was expecting something different, but not only is that totally valid, but it's way cooler than what I was thinking.
Right,
And these
right.
like crafting those moments take so much preparation. They don't exist as a snapshot at the end. In fact, more often than not, I'm so fervently in belief of this idea that I might go so far as to say is you could work like you could work the least amount on the event and the resolution and the result, and put all the work into the setup. That a great setup and like a so-so delivery or a so-so punchline, still pretty strong. Best punchline ever without a setup goes nowhere.
Right, right. And I think you can ask most players, right? There is a game story, which is what the game intends for you to experience, right? But
Yeah.
I think the most memorable moments that people talk about, at least just anecdotally, is usually their very own player story, right? Like how they interacted with the systems that are in the game or with the setup that's in the game, right? And I think, if you look at a good example of this is like if you look at immersive sims, right? They provide you sort of the tools and the bumpers for like what is too far, what is not far enough, and then the tools, and then sort of like they let the player engineer the solutions and sort of like they weave their little bits into the gameplay of the story on how they interact with those, systemic gameplay things that are set in place, right? It's
Totally, totally.
it's the I gave you a toolbox, and maybe some tools are better for some circumstances, but the entire toolbox is absolutely usable. And when you figure out something that you're like, has anybody ever done this? Is this even possible? You feel like a mad genius when it succeeds because you've just created sort of like you as the player, you carved your little piece into that storyline.
Well, I mean, it is such an advanced maneuver, right, to trick the player into believing they're doing something they weren't supposed to do. That's awesome.
Right.
That is so powerful, and it's true. Like the story you're talking about, right? That's why. Well, I like describing, by the way, the story of the game's world or the context of in-world story or in-game story. That's just another game design system. Think of like the word. Let's say there were words at the beginning of every level, and there was like a chapter, like set like a little block of like a chapter heading, and that those words were sort of intended to give you an understanding of the larger arc of the game's story. How do you assess whether those words are pulling their load? Right? Think of them as a game system that has a responsibility to bear on the player's experience. And so maybe we can say we want these blocks of text to meaningfully make the player understand what's going on so that, you know, they're to understand maybe that there's this death cult called the blah 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 and its leader is the main villain. And so by the third chapter I want you to know that. Well, then now you can test it. It's just another system. It's just that its code are changing words or changing the format that you display the words or using voice to convey those words. Every word in the game is just its own type of coding language or a system that has a responsibility in terms of impacting the player's experience. Now, the one story that's at the bottom of it all is the player's lived story, though, because you can't reduce that any further, right?
Right.
Like that's there's nothing that goes past that. All the other things we do are sort of like could be seen sort of as magnets trying to create that player experience. And and as a result, I kind of like saying that that's the product of our work. Like I am not making a software build, an executable that has all of this functionality and behaves the way it does when interacted with. My product is the changes that happen to you when you play it. And if you keep your mind thinking about it that way, then you're always working towards the hard stuff. The hard stuff is making it happen for people for real.
Right. Definitely. Um, well, I think we are about up on time. Um,
All good.
Thank you so much for joining us and providing us with, such a thoughtful topic. And just a heads up, if anybody missed this talk, I mean, if you're here, you're probably seeing it, but this talk will be on the IGDA LA YouTube channel. So, for anybody who wants to take a look or have a friend or someone they were like, oh man, wish you could have heard this talk, don't worry, this will be up on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow, and you can send them the link, and we would love for more viewers. And as a reminder, we will be continuing to run the speaker series probably quarterly as we continue. And as you mentioned earlier, the IGDA LA chapter hosts a monthly gathering at Marina Del Rey in the Yard House. Yes, the Yard House. Um, it's normally the last Wednesday of the month,
Usually you
and
have to describe it as the fourth Wednesday
the
of the
the
month because
fourth.
occasionally there's a fifth.
That's true. That's true. So the fourth Wednesday of every month, not next month though, because there is a event happening on like believe the same day. So we are rescheduling around that. But normally it's going to be the fourth Wednesday of every month. So if you're curious or you just want to meet some really cool people, be a part of the community, um, come join us. And another thing is that the IGDA LA chapter will be helping out with the Unlikely Collaborator Game Jam. I don't have a ton of information on that yet because we are still getting things set up, but stay posted and we will get more information as more information comes to us. And last but not least, GDC is right around the corner. Um, it is a very expensive trip, but if you find yourself out at GDC, IGDA will be doing mentor sessions, and we'll have stuff set up. So please do swing by. Um, you know, we love to meet you and chat with you. If you are looking for mentors, they will be mentors around. And if there
Do,
is if you are a mentor and you're looking to mentor someone, stop by the booth. We could always use more mentors.
Tony, you should totally have me do that.
uh, you know Tomo, please come by the
No, I will. I
IDGA
will. I'll be
booth.
there. I will.
Awesome. All right.
Oh, and
Oh,
final
IGDA
plug.
parties. There. I don't think we are doing one. I know that there are a lot of other stuff going on. I
Yeah,
think.
GDCparties.com.
Yep.
Join up.
GDCparties.com. I think
Get
there
a ticket.
is a IGDA Wiggy event, but I'm sure that will be on GDCparty.com as well.
Absolutely. And hurry up. Sign up to all the Eventbrite.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, and
Yes.
I am doing a presentation, I think Tuesday afternoon on Tools Summit called a Micro Talk about Spreadsheets Part 2.
Ooh, there you go. So Tomo will be doing the talk there too. So yeah. We'll share more information on the IGDA Discord. By the way, if you don't know, we do have a Discord. Join us. We'd love to have more people. And with that, I am going to take us out and hit the outro. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And I will see you next time.